metal was cold against my fingertips, but the secret it held burned like fire. I shouldn't have opened the back of the watch. I shouldn't have pried the gold casing apart with my trembling thumbnail, standing there in the middle of my grandmother's dusty attic, surrounded by 80 years of a life I thought I understood. But I did. The heavy silence of the house seemed to press against my eardrums as the latch finally gave way with a sharp metallic click. I expected to see the gears, the intricate heartbeat of a machine that had stopped ticking the moment her heart stopped beating 3 days ago. I expected to see nothing but brass and dust. Instead, I saw the inscription. It was etched in elegant, flowing cursive, worn slightly by time but still impossibly clear under the beam of my flashlight. My heart beats only for you. Forever, Julian. 1958. I stopped breathing. The air in the attic suddenly felt too thin. My grandfather's name was Arthur. They had been married in 1950. In 1958, my father was already 3 years old. My grandmother, Eleanor Vance, the woman who was canonized in our town as the symbol of marital loyalty, the woman who wore black for 20 years after my grandfather died, had carried a love token from another man, and she had hidden it where no one would ever look. My hands shook so violently that the watch slipped, dangling by its gold chain, swaying back and forth like a pendulum counting down to the destruction of my family's history. Who was Julian? And why did my grandmother, a woman incapable of telling a lie, take this secret to her grave? I need you to understand who Eleanor Vance was to the world before I tell you what I found next. To everyone in the sleepy town of Oakhaven, she was the Iron Lady with the velvet heart. She was the one who baked blueberry pies for the church fundraisers, the one who polished the pews on Saturdays, and the one who spoke of my grandfather, Arthur, as if he were a saint who had ascended too soon. I'm Sophie, her granddaughter. I'm an archivist by trade. I restore old manuscripts. I fix broken spines of books. I glue together fragments of history. I deal in facts, in paper trails, in things that can be proven. My relationship with Grandma was quiet, but deep. We bonded over tea and silence. She often told me, "Sophie, the truth is the only thing that doesn't decay." It's ironic now, isn't it? I was the one chosen to sort through her estate because my mother, her daughter, was too distraught, too fragile to handle the physical weight of death. Mom was downstairs right now, greeting neighbors who came with casseroles and pitying glances, while I was up here, tasked with sorting junk from keepsakes. The attic smelled of dried lavender and mothballs, a scent that used to comfort me but now felt suffocating. I had found the watch not in a jewelry box, not in a safe, but sewn, literally stitched, inside the lining of her heavy winter coat. The one she wore every Sunday. The one she refused to replace even when the wool went threadbare. She had carried this man, this Julian, against her ribs, right over her heart, every single winter for 60 years. I looked at the watch face again. It wasn't a woman's delicate timepiece. It was a man's pocket watch, heavy, expensive. The glass was cracked in the corner, a spiderweb fracture that suggested violence or a fall. This wasn't just a gift. This was a relic of a life she had amputated from her own biography. I sat down on a stack of old National Geographic magazines, the dust motes dancing in the singular beam of light coming from the dormer window. I traced the name Julian with my thumb. The engraving was deep. Expensive work. 1958. I did the math again, desperate for it to be a mistake. In 1958, Grandpa Arthur had just opened the hardware store on Main Street. They were the golden couple. There were photos downstairs on the mantel proving it. Black and white smiles. My father as a toddler on Arthur's shoulders. If this Julian was a lover, when did she see him? How? Grandma didn't drive. She rarely left town. But then, a memory surfaced, sharp and unbidden. I was 7 years old, sitting on the porch swing. A letter had arrived. Grandma had read it, her face turning the color of ash. She didn't cry. She just stared at the horizon with a look of such profound desolation that I felt cold despite the summer heat. When I asked her what was wrong, she tore the letter into tiny confetti-sized pieces and buried them in the rose garden. "Just a bill, Sophie," she had said. "Just a mistake." I looked at the watch again. There was something else. Under the inscription, near the hinge, there was a tiny symbol scratched into the gold. Not by a jeweler, but by hand. A crude drawing of a lighthouse. Oakhaven was landlocked. We were hundreds of miles from the ocean. The nearest lighthouse was in Stone Harbor, a place Grandma claimed she had never visited because the sea air gave her migraines. I stood up, the floorboards groaning under my boots. I walked over to the wooden chest where she kept the family albums. I needed to see the timeline. I flipped through the leather-bound book until I hit 1958. There were pages missing. Not torn out, but carefully excised with a razor blade. The spine was clean. It was surgical. A whole year of family history. Just gone. The watch ticked in my hand, loud and rhythmic, mocking the silence of the room. It wasn't broken. It was wound. She had wound it before she went to the hospital for the last time. She wanted someone to find this. Or maybe she was terrified we would. I slipped the heavy gold watch into the pocket of my jeans, the cold metal pressing against my thigh like a burning coal. I couldn't leave it in the attic. The house below me was waking up to the grim reality of the funeral reception. I could hear the murmur of voices rising through the floorboards, a low, droning hum of condolences that sounded rehearsed and hollow. I descended the narrow staircase, each step creaking in protest, announcing my return to the land of the living. The air in the hallway was thick, cloying with the scent of lilies and roasted ham. It was the smell of grief in the South, a mixture of perfume, food, and old timber. In the kitchen, my mother, Elise, was a study in frantic composure. She was wrapping leftover sandwiches in cling film with a violence that betrayed her state of mind. Her hands, usually so steady, were trembling. She looked up as I entered, her eyes rimmed with red, her makeup slightly smudged. She was the spitting image of Grandma, but without the softness. Mom had inherited Grandpa Arthur's steel spine. "Sophie," she snapped, though her voice wavered. "Where have you been? Mrs. Gable has been asking about the photo montage. You were supposed to handle the projector." "I was in the attic," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. I walked over to the island, leaning against the cold granite. "I found something, Mom." Her hand stopped moving for a fraction of a second, the cling film tearing with a sharp zip. She didn't look at me. She focused intently on a plate of deviled eggs. "We don't have time for nostalgia right now, Sophie. The executor is coming tomorrow. We need to have the house cleared by the end of the month." "It's not nostalgia," I said, reaching into my pocket. I didn't pull the watch out yet. I wanted to see her reaction first. I was looking through the albums, the blue leather ones. "Mom, why is 1958 missing?" The kitchen went silent. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to roar. Mom slowly set down the plate. She wiped her hands on her apron, a slow, deliberate motion that made the hair on my arms stand up. She turned to me, her expression hardening into a mask of warning. "Old books fall apart, Sophie. Pages get lost. Moisture, silverfish. It happens." "It was cut," I corrected her, stepping closer. "Razor straight. And then I found this." I pulled out the watch. The gold caught the kitchen light, gleaming ominously. I dangled it by the chain. Mom's face drained of color. It wasn't a gradual pale. It was instant, as if the blood had been siphoned out of her. She recognized it. She didn't just recognize it. She was terrified of it. She lunged forward, not to hold it, but to cover it, to hide it. "Put that away," she hissed, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. She looked toward the living room doorway, checking if any of the grieving neighbors were watching. "Where did you find that? Give it to me." "It has a name inside," I said, pulling it back out of her reach. "Julian." "Who is Julian, Mom?" "Give it to me, Sophie." She grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong, her nails digging into my skin. It wasn't the reaction of a grieving daughter. It was the reaction of a co-conspirator. It's nothing. It's junk. Just some trinket she probably bought at an estate sale years ago. It doesn't mean anything. Grandma sewed it into her coat, I said, my voice rising. She wore it over her heart for 60 years. You don't do that with estate sale junk. And the date. 1958. The same year the photos are missing. The year Grandpa expanded the store. The year you were 3. Stop it, she pleaded, her eyes filling with fresh tears. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of panic. Your grandfather was a good man. He built this family. He built this town. Do not dishonor him today of all days. I'm not talking about Grandpa, I shouted, and the chatter in the living room ceased instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, judgmental. Mom released my wrist, stepping back as if burned. She smoothed her apron, her chest heaving. We will discuss this later, she said, her voice icy. Put that away. Or so help me God, Sophie. I will throw it in the river myself. She turned and marched out to the guests, putting on her tragic smile like a piece of armor. I stood alone in the kitchen, the watch pulsing in my hand. She was lying. She knew exactly who Julian was. And worse, she was afraid of him. Or afraid of what knowing him meant. I couldn't stay in the house. The suffocation was physical now. I grabbed my car keys and slipped out the back door. The cool autumn air hit my face, but it didn't calm me. I needed answers that my mother refused to give. I looked at the watch again. The lighthouse, the crude scratching. I pulled out my phone and typed, Lighthouse 1958 Stone Harbor. Thousands of results. Useless. Then I remembered something. Grandpa Arthur was a hoarder of documents. He kept receipts for gum he bought in 1972. He had a workshop behind the garage, a place Grandma was never allowed to enter. We were told it was dangerous. Saws, chemicals, sharp tools. But Grandpa had been dead for 10 years. The workshop had been locked up since then. I walked across the damp grass to the detached garage. The padlock was rusted, coated in a decade of grime. I didn't have the key. I looked around, spotted a heavy brick from the garden border, and without a second thought, I smashed the lock. It took 3 strikes, sparks flying, the jarring impact vibrating up my arm, until the shackle snapped. I slid the heavy wooden door open. The smell hit me instantly. Stale oil, sawdust, and something metallic. The workshop was frozen in time. Tools hung on pegboards in perfect outlines. Jars of screws were organized by size. It was the sanctuary of a control freak. I began tearing through the filing cabinets. Tax returns, supplier invoices, nothing. I felt a surge of frustration. Maybe Mom was right. Maybe I was chasing a ghost. But as I leaned back against his heavy workbench, my heel caught on a loose floorboard. It didn't just creak, it shifted. I knelt down, pushing aside a heavy box of rusty chains. The floorboard was loose. I pried it up with a screwdriver. Beneath it, nestled in the insulation, was a metal lockbox. Not a modern safe, but an old gray cash box. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled it out. It wasn't locked. I opened the lid. The contents of the box were not what I expected. There was no money, no jewelry. On top lay a stack of envelopes. They were yellowed, the edges soft and fraying. I picked up the first one. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was my grandmother's. Elegant, flowing script. Addressed to Mr. Julian Thorne, 42 Seaside Lane, Stone Harbor. But across the front of the envelope, in aggressive red ink, was a stamp. Return to sender. Inmate unknown. Inmate. I froze. My breath hitched. Inmate. I picked up the next letter. Same stamp. And the next. There were dozens of them, all written by Grandma, all returned. I opened the first one. The date was October 14th, 1958. My dearest Julian, Arthur has locked the bedroom door again. He says I am sick. He says my love for you is a disease that he must cure. I told him I am leaving. I told him the baby is yours. He laughed. He said you will never see the light of day again. He said he has friends in the precinct who owe him favors. I am scared, Julian. Please tell them the truth. Tell them I came to you willingly. Tell them it wasn't kidnapping. I am waiting for you. I will wait forever. I dropped the letter. The paper fluttered to the dirty floor. The baby is yours. I did the math again, my brain screaming in denial. My father was born in January 1955, but Grandma had a miscarriage in 1959, or so we were told. The family legend was that she lost a child due to stress. I dug deeper into the box. Under the letters, there was a file folder, a police report. Date, September 20th, 1958. Subject, Julian Thorne. Charge, grand larceny and kidnapping. Complainant, Arthur Vance. The report detailed a crime that sounded like a movie plot. Julian Thorne, a watchmaker from Stone Harbor, was accused of stealing jewelry from the Vance residence and abducting Eleanor Vance. But attached to the police report was a receipt, a handwritten note on Arthur's hardware store stationery. Payment to Officer Miller, $500, case closed. Thorne goes to Blackwood Penitentiary, 20 years. The room spun. My grandfather, the pillar of the community, the man who handed out candy to children, hadn't just been jealous. He had framed an innocent man. He had bought the police. He had sent my grandmother's lover, a watchmaker, to prison for 20 years to keep her. And the twist didn't stop there. Beneath the police report was a birth certificate, not for my father, for a baby boy born February 11th, 1959. Name, Leo Vance. Father, Arthur Vance. Mother, Eleanor Vance. But across the bottom, in Arthur's handwriting, were the words, adopted out, closed records, St. Jude's Orphanage. Grandma didn't have a miscarriage. She had a son, Julian's son, and Arthur had given him away. I sat on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by the debris of a lie that had lasted half a century. The watch wasn't just a token of affection. It was a memento of the man whose life was destroyed so my family could exist. The lighthouse scratching, Stone Harbor. Julian was a watchmaker. He made the watch for her. My grandmother had lived with the monster who ruined her life. She had cooked his meals, washed his clothes, raised his children, my father, all while knowing he had stolen her true love and her child. Suddenly, the garage door slid open further. The light flooded in, blinding me. I told you to leave it alone, Sophie. It was Mom, but she wasn't alone. Standing behind her was Uncle Robert, Arthur's younger brother, the family lawyer, the man who handled all the messy business. He was leaning on his cane, looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. You knew, I whispered, not standing up. I held the birth certificate in my hand like a weapon. You both knew. Mom stepped into the garage, her heels clicking on the concrete. She looked at the papers scattered on the floor, the evidence of her father's sins. Her face crumbled, the angry mask falling away to reveal a terrified little girl. It was a different time, Sophie, Uncle Robert said, his voice gravelly and calm, the voice of a man used to burying bodies, metaphorically speaking. Arthur did what he had to do to protect the family name. Eleanor was unwell. She was infatuated with a drifter. A drifter. I scrambled to my feet, shaking the letter at him. He was a watchmaker. She loved him. Grandpa framed him. He paid off the cops. I pointed at the receipt. It's right here. He sent an innocent man to prison. He saved her reputation, Robert barked, stepping forward, his cane hitting the ground with a thud. Do you have any idea what would have happened to her in 1958? Running off with a nobody? Pregnant with a bastard child? She would have been ruined. Arthur took her back. He forgave her. Forgave her? I screamed, my voice cracking. He imprisoned her. He gave away her child. I looked at Mom. She was crying silently, hugging her arms around herself. "Mom, tell me you didn't know about the baby, please." Mom looked up, her eyes swimming in tears. "I was 3, Sophie. I didn't know then. But when I was 18, Arthur told me. He told me I had a half-brother out there. He made me swear never to tell Mom that I knew. He said if I brought it up, it would kill her." "So you let her suffer alone?" I asked, disgusted. She sewed a watch into her coat just to feel close to him. "She died with this secret eating her alive because you were too cowardly to stand up to Grandpa's ghost." "You don't understand fear, Sophie," Mom yelled back, her voice echoing in the small space. "You didn't grow up in this house with him. Arthur Vance wasn't just a strict father. He was a god in this town. If he said the sky was green, you said it was green. If I had looked for that boy, if I had mentioned Julian, he would have cut me off. He would have destroyed me too. So it was about money?" I spat the words out. "You kept quiet for the inheritance?" "It was about survival," Mom sobbed. "And looking at those papers won't change anything now. They are all dead. Julian died in prison in 1978. Arthur is dead. Eleanor is dead. Why dig this up? Why hurt us now?" "Because there is a brother," I said, my voice trembling. "There is a man out there who doesn't know who he is. Julian's son. My uncle." Uncle Robert reached out a hand. "Give me the papers, Sophie. We will burn them. We will put this to rest with Eleanor." I looked at the lighter on the workbench, then at the papers, then at the watch in my pocket. I felt the weight of my grandmother's silence, the decades of repressed grief. "No," I said firmly. Robert narrowed his eyes. "Sophie, be reasonable. This scandal would destroy your mother's standing in the church, in the town." "I don't care about the town," I shouted. "Grandma kept this watch for a reason. She left clues for a reason. She didn't destroy these letters. Arthur did, but he kept them as trophies. She wanted someone to find them. She wanted justice." I grabbed the metal box, shoving the papers back inside. I clutched it to my chest. "I'm going to find him," I said, backing away toward the door. "I'm going to find Leo Vance, or whatever his name is now. If you walk out that door with those papers," Uncle Robert threatened, his voice dropping to a menacing low, "you are out of the will. The house, the money, everything goes to the charity trust. Arthur set it up that way. A contingency clause for disloyalty." Mom looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Sophie, please. It's $1 million in assets. Don't throw your life away for a dead man." I looked at the watch in my hand. I flipped it open. "My heart beats only for you." I looked at my mother, a woman broken by secrets and money. "Keep the money," I said, my voice shaking but resolute. "Grandma already paid the price for it." I turned and ran. I ran to my car, threw the box in the passenger seat, and locked the doors just as Uncle Robert stepped out of the garage. I turned the ignition, the engine roaring to life. As I reversed out of the driveway, leaving the house of lies behind, I saw my mother collapse into her uncle's arms. But I wasn't looking back. I was looking at the address on the birth certificate, St. Jude's Orphanage. It closed in the 90s, but the records had to be somewhere. And then, my phone buzzed. I had left the search tab open. A new result had popped up for Julian Thorne Watchmaker, Stone Harbor. It was a forum post from a vintage watch collector site, dated 2 days ago. Found a rare movement signed by Julian Thorne. Incredible craftsmanship. The seller says he learned the trade from his father in prison. Seller is located in Stone Harbor. Name, Leo Thorne. I slammed on the brakes at the end of the driveway. He wasn't dead. Julian died in prison, yes. But the son knew. The son had taken his father's name. The twist wasn't just that I had an uncle. It was that he was waiting. The drive to Stone Harbor was a blur of asphalt and adrenaline. The sky had turned a bruised purple. threatening a storm that mirrored the chaos inside my own chest. The GPS on my dashboard glowed with a destination that shouldn't exist. Thorn Horology, 42 Seaside Lane. My phone buzzed incessantly on the passenger seat. Calls from Mom, texts from Uncle Robert threatening legal action, voicemail notifications piling up like debris. I ignored them all. The only thing that mattered was the metal box rattling next to me and the watch burning a hole in my pocket. Stone Harbor in the off-season was a ghost town. The boardwalk was empty. The carnival rides stood like skeletal remains against the darkening sky, and the ocean churned with a violent gray foam. I drove past shuttered saltwater taffy shops and boarded up arcades until I found Seaside Lane. It was a narrow cobblestone street that smelled of brine and old timber. Number 42 was a small, weathered storefront squeezed between a bakery and a vacant lot. The sign above the door was hand-painted, the gold leaf peeling away to reveal the dark wood beneath. Thorn Horology, Esther 1950. The windows were dark, cluttered with the silhouettes of grandfather clocks standing like sentinels. A closed sign hung askew in the door. I parked the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Fear washed over me. What if he wasn't there? What if he was just a name on a forum? Or worse, what if he was exactly like my grandfather, hard, bitter, and uninterested in the past? I took a deep breath, grabbed the metal box, and stepped out into the biting sea wind. I walked to the door and knocked. The sound was swallowed by the wind. I knocked again, harder, the glass rattling in its frame. Nothing. I pressed my face against the cold glass, peering into the gloom. Inside, hundreds of clocks ticked in a chaotic, unsynchronized rhythm. It was a cacophony of time, a heartbeat of metal and wood. Then, I saw movement. A shadow in the back of the shop detached itself from the darkness. A light flickered on, casting a warm, yellow glow over a workbench cluttered with tools. The door opened with the chime of a heavy brass bell. The man standing there was tall, with broad shoulders that were slightly stooped, as if he carried a physical weight. He wore a heavy canvas apron stained with oil and ink. His hair was a shock of white, but his eyes were blue, the exact same piercing, intelligent blue as my grandmother's. He didn't smile. He looked at me with a weary suspicion, wiping his grease-stained hands on a rag. "Shop's closed," he said. His voice was deep, gravelly, worn down by years of silence. "The sign is right there." "I'm not a customer," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound strong. He paused, his eyes narrowing. He looked at my clothes, my black funeral dress, the pearls, the evident distress. He looked at the metal box in my arms. "If you're selling antiques, I'm not buying. Market's dead." "I'm not selling," I said. I took a step closer, into the threshold. "Are you Leo? Leo Thorne?" His demeanor changed instantly. The weariness vanished, replaced by a sharp, defensive tension. He stopped wiping his hands. He stood straighter, blocking the entrance. "Who's asking?" "My name is Sophie," I said. I needed to say it. I needed to see the recognition. "Sophie Vance." The name hit him like a physical blow. He flinched, a micro-expression of pain and anger crossing his face. He stepped back, gripping the doorframe as if to slam it shut. "Vance." He spat the name out like a curse. "You have 5 seconds to get off my property before I call the sheriff. I don't deal with Vances. Not anymore. Not ever. Please." I jammed my foot in the door before he could close it. "I'm Eleanor's granddaughter." He froze. The door hovered inches from my face. He looked at me, really looked at me, searching for a lie. "Eleanor is dead," he said flatly. "I saw the obituary. Beloved wife of the late Arthur Vance. That's what it said. Model of virtue. Don't come here to mock me." "She died 3 days ago," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "And she left me this." I didn't hand him the box. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the watch. The gold pocket watch. Leo stared at it. His breath hitched in his throat. He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers hovering over the gold casing. He didn't touch it, as if he were afraid it would burn him. "That's," he whispered, his voice breaking. "That's the prototype." "The what?" I asked. "My father, Julian. He made that. It wasn't just a watch. It was his masterpiece. He made it for her in 1958. He told me about it. He said it was the only thing he ever made that was perfect, because it was made for the only person who mattered." He looked up at me, his eyes shining with a sudden, devastating vulnerability. He opened the door wide. "Come in." The shop smelled of cedar, clock oil, and old paper. He led me to the back, to the small workbench illuminated by the single lamp. He cleared a space, pushing aside gears and springs. "May I?" he asked, pointing to the watch. I handed it to him. He took it with the reverence of a priest handling a holy relic. He popped the back open with a fluid, practiced motion, the same motion I had struggled with in the attic. He read the inscription. "My heart beats only for you." He closed his eyes, a single tear escaping and tracking through the grease on his cheek. "He thought she threw it away," Leo said softly. "My father. He died in prison thinking she had discarded it, thinking she had chosen Arthur and the money. She wore it every day," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "She sewed it into her coat. She kept it over her heart for 60 years. She never forgot him, Leo. She was a prisoner too." I placed the metal box on the workbench and opened it. I took out the letters, the ones stamped inmate unknown. I took out the birth certificate. I took out the receipt for the bribe that sent Julian to prison. Leo looked at the papers. He picked up the birth certificate, his hands shaking violently now. He traced the signature of Arthur Vance. "I knew about the adoption," he said, his voice hollow. "I grew up in the system, bounced around foster homes. I always knew I was a Vance by blood, but I was told my mother was a whore who sold me. That's what Arthur told the social workers. That's what was in my file." "He lied," I said fiercely. "She wrote these letters to Julian. Look at them. She was begging him to come back. She was waiting for him. Arthur intercepted everything. He paid off the cops to frame Julian, and he threatened to destroy her if she ever tried to find you." Leo picked up one of the yellowed envelopes. He opened it, reading the desperate scrawl of a woman trapped in a golden cage. He read the part about the baby. "The baby is yours. I will wait forever." He slumped onto a stool, the weight of 50 years of hatred dissolving into grief. He covered his face with his hands and wept. It was a guttural, raw sound. The sound of a man mourning a mother he had hated his entire life, only to find out she had loved him more than her own freedom. I stood there, silent, letting him process the shift in his universe. I looked around the shop. On the wall, framed in a dusty corner, was a newspaper clipping from 1978. "Inmate dies in fire at Blackwood Penitentiary." "Leo," I asked softly after a while, "what happened to Julian?" Leo wiped his face with the back of his hand, smearing the oil, looking like a broken child. He stood up and walked to a safe in the corner of the room. He spun the dial. Left, right, left. 195811, the date of his birth. He pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. "My father didn't just die," Leo said, his voice gaining strength. "He was murdered. Or he let himself be killed." He handed me the notebook. It was a prison diary. "Read the last entry," he said. I opened the book. The handwriting was shaky, written in pencil. October 12th, 1978. "Arthur came to visit today. He says Eleanor is happy. He says she has forgotten me. But he offered me a deal. He says if I stop appealing my case, if I stop trying to send letters to the boy, he will make sure the boy is taken care of. He says he will pay for his schooling. He says if I persist, The boy will have an accident. I cannot risk it. I have to die to keep them safe. If I am gone, Arthur has no reason to hurt Leo. My death is the only shield I can give my son. Goodbye, my love. Goodbye, my son. I hope one day you know I didn't leave you. I was erased. I stared at the page. The cruelty was absolute. Arthur hadn't just framed Julian. He had blackmailed him into suicide to protect his secret. He died 2 days later, Leo said. A fire in the laundry room. They called it an accident. But Arthur paid for my trade school, an anonymous donor. I became a watchmaker because it was the only thing I had of my father. The genetic memory of gears and time. We have to expose this, I said, the rage boiling over. We have to tell the world. My mother, she wants to bury it. She wants the inheritance. Leo looked at me. He looked at the watch. He looked at the diary. What do you want, Sophie? Revenge or peace? I want the truth, I said. Arthur Vance has a statue in the town square. There's a library named after him. He was a monster. And Eleanor, everyone thinks she was just a quiet, obedient wife. They need to know she was a warrior who survived him. Leo picked up the watch again. He turned it over in his hands. This watch, he said, pointing to a tiny mechanism on the side. My father was a genius. He didn't just engrave it. He built a complication into it. A complication? A secret compartment. Watchmakers used to do it for royalty, to hide poison or portraits. He took a tiny screwdriver, thinner than a needle. He pressed it into a microscopic hole near the stem of the watch. Click. The back of the watch didn't just open, it split. A false bottom popped up. Inside, folded into a square the size of a fingernail, was a piece of onion skin paper. Leo unfolded it with tweezers. It was fragile, translucent. It wasn't a letter. It was a last will and testament, dated 1958, signed by Eleanor Vance, witnessed by Julian Thorne. I, Eleanor Vance, being of sound mind but under duress, hereby declare that all assets, properties, and holdings currently in my name, inherited from my father's estate, the Oakhaven Mills, belong to my true husband in spirit, Julian Thorne, and our son. Arthur Vance has no claim to the mill fortune. If I die, this watch contains the truth. I gasped. The mill fortune. That's the foundation of the family wealth. Grandpa Arthur didn't build the hardware store empire with his money. He built it with hers. She owned the money, Leo realized, his eyes widening. Arthur married her for the mill money, and when she tried to leave with me and Julian, he had to stop her or he would lose everything. This will predates everything, I said. And since you are the biological son, and I found it, it means Arthur stole everything, Leo finished. And legally, half of that town belongs to me. The silence in the shop was deafening. The ticking clock seemed to get louder, a rhythmic applause for the truth finally surfacing. Your mother, Leo said, looking at me intensely. If we use this, she loses everything. The house, the status, the money. I thought of my mother in the kitchen. Her fear, her complicity. She had chosen comfort over truth for 50 years. She had let her own brother grow up thinking he was unloved. She made her choice, I said. Now it's time to make ours. The funeral of Eleanor Vance was supposed to be a dignified, quiet affair. It became a reckoning. I didn't storm the church. I didn't scream. I simply walked in, 5 minutes after the service began, with an old man in a cheap suit by my side. The entire town was there. My mother was in the front row, flanked by Uncle Robert. When she saw me, she looked relieved. When she saw Leo, she turned to stone. We walked down the center aisle. The sound of our footsteps on the marble floor echoed like thunder. Leo walked with a limp, but his head was held high. He looked so much like the photos of young Eleanor that a ripple of whispers started in the pews. We stopped at the casket. It was closed, covered in white lilies. Leo reached out and touched the wood. He didn't speak to the crowd. He spoke to her. "I'm here, Mom," he whispered. "I know." Then, he took the gold watch from his pocket and placed it on top of the flowers. My mother stood up, her face a mask of terror. "Sophie, what is this? Who is this?" I turned to face her, and then to face the congregation, the neighbors, the friends, the people who worshipped the Vance name. "This," I said, my voice projecting clear and strong, "is Leo Vance, Eleanor's son, and he is here to claim his mother." I didn't read the will then. I didn't need to. The resemblance was enough. The truth was written in his eyes. Uncle Robert tried to stand, to protest, but the look I gave him, a look that said, "I have the diary, I have the police report, I have the bribe receipt," forced him back into his seat. He knew it was over. The aftermath was messy, legal, and loud. The will and the watch was contested, of course, but the diary and the police records triggered an investigation. The statue of Arthur Vance was removed from the square 6 months later. The Vance family trust was dissolved. My mother stopped speaking to me. She moved to Florida, unable to bear the shame of the truth. She kept her silence to the bitter end, a victim of her own complicity. But the real ending didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened 3 months later, in the garden of the old house, the day before it was sold. Leo was there. We were digging in the rose garden, the place where Grandma had buried the confetti of the letter when I was 7. "Why are we doing this?" Leo asked, leaning on his shovel. "We have the truth. She buried her pain here," I said. "I want to plant something new." We planted a hydrangea bush, blue for her eyes. As we packed up the soil, Leo handed me a small box. "I fixed it," he said. I opened the box. It was the watch. The glass was replaced. The gold was polished. It ticked with a strong, healthy rhythm. "It's yours," he said. "You're the historian. You're the one who saves things." "I didn't save her," I said, looking at the house. I was too late. "No," Leo said, putting a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You didn't save her life, but you saved her story. And sometimes, Sophie, sometimes that's the only immortality we get." I looked at the watch. "My heart beats only for you." I realized then that the watch wasn't measuring time. It was measuring love. It had endured prison, theft, burial, and silence. It had outlasted the lies. "Come on, Uncle Leo," I said, smiling for the first time in months. "Let's go home." We walked away from the house, leaving the ghosts behind. The sun was setting, casting long shadows. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I had the time in my pocket, and the truth by my side. In the end, I learned that family isn't about whose blood you have. It's about who bleeds for you. And the truth? The truth is like a watch mechanism. You can hide it, you can break it, you can bury it in the dark. But sooner or later, if you listen closely enough, you will hear it ticking.